Thanks for visiting Patient and Weather today. I'm meteorologist Al Peterlin. I'd like to talk about the weather health stresses for May 8th, 2026. We keep additional graphics at tpatw.com. We also maintain a storefront on Amazon. Amazon purchases made through our storefront support the activities of Patient Weather. Looking at the surface map for Friday, lots of activity. There is that cool front still lingering from San Antonio to New Orleans to Tampa. Lots of activity across the southeast. There is another low pressure center and cool front stretching all the way from Amarillo across to Cleveland, and that putting a swath of weather unsettled activity all the way across the Central Plains into the Middle Mississippi and Ohio Valley. Finally, a third cold front trying to push on into the Dakotas. Looking at our vitality index, it's a composite image of the individual weather elements that might give some difficulties. And you can see we have some activity here in the southern half of the Four Corners. Little bit of activity from El Paso up across Dallas into Oklahoma. Some activity in the northern plains, basically North Dakota. And then we still have some activity lingering along the Gulf, moving on up into the southeast, especially South Carolina. Notice a rather unusual little bit of activity here across central Florida. Not sure yet if that's real or an artifact. Looking at pressure change, we have falling pressure here across Texas, Oklahoma, and Arkansas, but we have rising pressure here in South Carolina, eastern North Carolina, and then through Delaware, New Jersey, eastern Pennsylvania, and trying to push on up into Connecticut and at least the easternmost portions of Massachusetts. Looking at temperature change, temperatures remain rather cool across a large portion of the country, but we are seeing some warming trying to push up here into Texas, Oklahoma, and then up the Rockies. Looking at dew point temperature change, rather interesting. We have rising dew points across the heartland, almost all of the central portion of the country, on up into the Ohio Valley, but a little swath of drying here in El Paso and some real drying here across the southeast. And note, we were talking about that artifact in Florida, and it looks as if there is a bulge or a bubble of increasing dew point temperatures and increasing vapor pressure here in central Florida. Looking at instability, we are finally settling down through portions of the interior portion of the country, but instability still lingers right along the Gulf, New Orleans, across to Tallahassee and the Florida Panhandle, and trying to stretch on up into South Carolina. And so a lot of unsettled weather still here in the extreme southeast. Looking at change in oxygen availability, you'll see we do have a risk of migraine, Washington, Oregon, and Vancouver. We do have a risk of migraine here in El Paso, a little bit of unusual here. And then we have a risk of migraine across the southeast, again from the toe of Louisiana across the Florida Panhandle, southern Alabama, all of Georgia, and especially difficult across northern Florida and South Carolina. We're also picking up a migraine risk here in some portions of Maryland, New Jersey, eastern Pennsylvania, trying to touch on into Connecticut and Massachusetts, and then of course probably off here into the easternmost portions of Canada. We have a bubble of asthma and arthritis across the Four Corners, significant asthma and arthritis risk across Texas into Oklahoma, Arkansas, and then a secondary asthma and arthritis risk here in the Ohio Valley, Indiana, Michigan, and Wisconsin. Thanks for visiting the Patient and Weather. Your comments are appreciated. And if you hurt, tell us where you're located.